true stories
that make us say,
wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
And I said, okay, God, this is so good. You're faithful. You're providing for us. And then I hear him say, she's going to offer you the house for 3 million pesos. Okay, that's a weird number.
My gas gauge is way below E. So we pulled this gas station. We just prayed.
I quit my job to pursue writing full time. I didn't know where my next paycheck was coming from. I felt like God was saying, trust me, I've got this.
I prayed and said, Lord, just show me what I'm supposed to do.
Hi, I'm Rob Vischer. Recently, I was invited by John, a new friend of mine, to a Friday night guys' dinner, and my wife and I both agreed that I should go. But here's the problem. The dinner was at Cane Prime, a fancy steakhouse in Nashville, and I didn't have any money left in our budget to buy a fancy steak. My wife said, no problem, just get an appetizer. I thought, yeah, right. That's way too expensive still. I'll order a mocktail. When I arrived at the restaurant to meet John and his friend in the bar area, I sat down on a leatherback stool and felt this deep impression of words that seemed like they were from God. These were the words: order whatever you want. I thought, no way, I can't pay for it. Again, and even more deeply, I felt, order whatever you want. I got you. So this left me with a dilemma. Do I order whatever I want and risk getting stuck with a bill that I can't pay? Or do I just get a mocktail and disobey what I think might be God? I'll tell you what I did after this first story, but for now, let's hear from Mary Lou, who was also faced with a dilemma after meeting a prepper from church.
My name is Mary Lou, and in 2010, I found myself single with an 8-year-old boy. Although we had bills paid, what I didn't have was grocery money. One of the simple ways that the Lord provided for me was the house that I lived in. We had a tree in the backyard, and it had a crop of plums. That was amazing. It was like a bumper crop of plums. Like the branches were hanging low, holding all these plums. And my son and I had plenty of plums. We shared them with family, my coworkers, and we even took some to church. And then neighbor kids would come over and pick plums. That brought parents with buckets. And this one tree fed so many people. So then the Lord used that metaphor and said, do you look and see how one tree fed so many people? I was attending a Bible study on Thursday nights, and I had Friday off, and Fridays were my day to do my errands. Well, Thursday night, we had a gentleman visit our Bible study who was very big into storing up goods for the future and stockpiling canned items, money. And it kind of changed my way of thinking a little bit because I was really living week to week on groceries, just buying a week at a time. And maybe I had a bag of rice on the shelf, maybe a few cans of soup. The next morning before I started my errands, I prayed and said, Lord, if I'm supposed to, stockpile more food items, please show me. I'm just not sure I'm supposed to do that. But if I'm supposed to, will you please show me? Just show me what I'm supposed to do. So then I set off to do my errands. And I started my day with $60 in my pocket. And that was to do my errands. My first thought was to buy some postage stamps. As I approached the desk, the clerk called from around a partition. She said, I'll be right there. You're the first one in here. I'll be right there. I'm not quite ready. And I said, okay, because I was early. I was the first person in the store. And this store was gleamingly clean. The floors, you could eat off the floors. They were so shiny. So I walked right up to the counter, and a moment later, she came out and walked around me. As she got behind me, she said, oh, you must have dropped this. And she handed me a $20 bill. And I looked in my purse and I'm thinking, I see my $60 and that's not my 20. And so I said, it can't be mine because I have the money that I started my day with. And she said, oh no, it has to be yours. You're the first person in here and we just clean these floors. It has to be yours. And so she forced me to take this 20. So now I have $80. I purchased my stamps. So I have $80 minus the cost of the stamps. And I went on to my next stop for my errands, which was a store in which I was going to purchase a seed sprouting kit. And I had been saving my money for that. It was like a $32.99 item, and I'd been saving my money for it. I went to the shelf to get it, and lo and behold, it said on the shelf that the item was $14.99. And I thought, wow, this is my lucky day. it's half price, and that's wonderful. So I get to the counter, and the lady at the register said, that will be $35.65. And I said, oh, well, that's what I was expecting in price, but it's back there on a shelf for $14.99. Really? She goes, let's go see. And she closed down her register and walked with me back to that rack. And she said, sure enough, we've got it down at $14.99. So then she walked me to the front and she put my item in a bag and she said, you're free to go. And I said, well, I still owe you the $14.99 plus tax. She said, no, when we make a mistake, you get the item for free. So now I walk out the store with my $80 minus the postage stamps and a free $35 item. And as I get to my car, I look down as I'm about to open up my car door, and there's a $20 bill laying right beside my driver's side door. I picked it up and looked around real quick to see if anyone is there, like putting a cart away, or the car next to me if someone had just gotten out and someone was walking to the store. And I kind of held the $20 bill up and looked around, and there was no one. There was no movement. And right then the Lord said, you do not need to stockpile. In the matter of 35 minutes, you now have $100 minus stamps plus a $35 item for free. And that just blew me away.
To convince Mary Lou that she didn't have to stock her basement with canned goods, God made it rain Andrew Jacksons from heaven. But when I was at Keen Prime deciding whether or not to order whatever I wanted, I didn't have 2 new 20s in my pocket like Mary Lou. So I split the difference. And I ordered chicken instead of steak. Not quite what I wanted, but also not quite fancy enough to make my debit card bounce. After praying for our food out loud, I said a quick silent prayer at dinner that night. Lord, you know I'm trying to obey. Even if I'm wrong, please see that I want to obey you. In our next story, Bryan Davis, a Christian fantasy author, tells us a true story about how he was trying to obey early in his writing career.
I quit my job to pursue writing full time. I didn't know where my next paycheck was coming from. I felt like God was saying, trust me, I've got this. I started going to homeschool conventions, and I was concerned it wasn't going to work. I was not going to make enough money. And at the end of this first convention, this one guy was there, and he was looking at one of my books. And he said, all right, I'll buy this book. It was the last time I was going to sell a book. He gave me the money. I was trying to figure out, did I make money or not? I figured out that I was going to be $50 short of breaking even. And okay, that failed. I can't afford to go out and not make money on the books. And then suddenly the man stopped. And he looked at the book like it was for the first time. And he said, Bryan Davis wrote this book. I said, yes. And he looked at me and said, are you Bryan Davis? I said, yes, I am. And then he started shaking and his face turned red. And he walked closer. He took out his wallet again. And he said, you're going to think this is really weird, but I got to tell you that on my way over here, God told me to find a man named Bryan and to give him $50. The exact money that I was thinking about at that moment that I was short of breaking even. And when I got home, I did the calculations. I figured out that with that $50, I broke even exactly to the dollar.
Bryan broke even because of the obedience of a stranger. And like Bryan, when I was at dinner with my friend, I wondered how I would break even and what I would tell my wife if I didn't break even. At the end of the meal, as I got my card out, my new friend John motioned to the bartender for the check. He paid for everything. The chicken, the appetizers he shared with me, and even a mocktail. I just nodded silently and thought, man, God, you do got me. I did not expect John to pick up my check. And in our next story, when Larry prays for gas money, God doesn't send a friend to pick up his check. But he does prompt Larry to do something really unexpected.
My name's Larry. I was a freshman at Lincoln Christian College back in the day in 1980, and a good friend of mine was from southern Indiana, and I had a car. He didn't have a car. Now, neither of us had any money, but at least I had a car. And he said, hey, man, I'm really homesick. any chance, and I knew his family too. He goes, can we go see my family this weekend in Southern Indiana? I'm like, sure, if we can just find some gas money, it'll be great. So anyway, and gas was like $1.38 back then, which I remember because I had a car that just drank gas like there's no end to tomorrow. And it was a great car, but it was very hungry for gas. So we went around trying to get money different ways. I think we had just, I thought, well, this is enough money. Now I was pretty good at math in high school, but I didn't do the math really on the trip and the gas and how many miles it was. I didn't really know. Didn't have like the GPS back then and all that stuff to help you. So anyway, I'm like, oh, this is plenty of money. So we go down there, we get down there, we drive around a little bit, and it's time to come back Sunday, and we're totally out of gas and money. And so I'm like, wow, this is great. So they were gracious. They gave us some money for gas. It was wonderful. So now you'd think that if it took, $30 to get down there, I would think that it's going to take about $30 to get back, right? So I'm pretty sure they gave us like $20, which I'm like, oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. So we're coming back through the back roads of Indiana, heading towards Lincoln, Illinois. And we're on some little 2-lane road, and my gas gauge is way below E. And as far as I can calculate, we're about an hour out still from Lincoln. And so I see this little bitty gas station out in the middle of nowhere. We're way below E. We're not stopped yet, but we're way below E. I'm like, oh. So we pull in this gas station. My buddy Sean, I said, Sean, we need to pray because I don't know what else to do. I didn't have a credit card. I did nothing. I had nothing. And it wasn't a diner, so it's not like I could wash dishes, you know what I'm saying? And so we just prayed. Now, I'm a little mechanical, but not greatly mechanical. So I felt like God impressed upon me, take out your back seat, like the part you sit down on, not that you lean back on. And this is a 1971 Chrysler. It was 9 years old, okay, at that time. I bought it used, second, third hand, whatever. And I'm like, God, I don't even know how to get that back seat out. He's like, yeah, I'll show you. So we fight and get that back seat out. I don't even know why I'm taking the back seat out. So I take the back seat out, and we look down there, and for 9 years, people have been sitting in that back seat, all sloped back, and all the money and coins were falling out of their pockets down underneath that seat. I'm like, no way! So we got all this money in our hands and just kind of laid it out before the clerk. He counted it all, and we had just enough gas to get back to Lincoln.
God prompted Larry to take the back seat out of his used car. Sounds kind of crazy. It kind of reminds me of the story in Matthew 17 where Jesus and Peter need money for the temple tax. Jesus tells Peter, go to the lake, throw out your line, take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you'll find a 4 drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and yours. I've heard this story many times, or versions of it, where God provides for immediate needs. But what about for dessert? As I headed home from my fancy Cane Prime dinner with John, I was pumped because I broke even that night. God provided, and I had a really good story to tell my wife, Joanna. As I smiled and silently pumped my fist a little, I felt God say, get some dessert for Joanna and for you to share. Where from? I asked. I heard her reply, get some banana pudding from Edley's. So on my way home, I took a little detour to Edley's for some of their famous banana pudding. I don't usually eat sugar, but if God tells me to, who am I to argue? In our next story, when Stephen is speaking in front of his church, God leads him to go off script and do a few things he and his wife don't usually do.
My wife and I, for the past 11 years, have been missionaries, 10 years of living in Mexico. Our vision in Mexico and in missions in general is to raise up local leaders where we hand the church over to them, that they're self-sustaining, where they're doing church without us. In February of this year, I went to a conference in my home church. It was a missions conference where they were inviting us to share about what we're doing in Guadalajara. I had the mic and said, hey, I'm Stephen, moving to Guadalajara as missionary. And the next thing that pops out of my mouth is, we're moving in July and I don't have a house yet. That's not in my notes. What is this about? After I got done sharing, at the end of the dinner, this lady walks up to us and she says, I hear you're moving to Guadalajara. Yes. Well, I'm originally from Guadalajara. Oh, okay. Well, I have a home that I'm looking to sell in Guadalajara. Would you be interested in buying it? And I was just shocked. I said, how is this that I'm in the middle of my hometown of 17,000 people and I run into a lady from Guadalajara, which, to put in perspective, is a city of 8 million people and growing. There just happens to be this one lady in my hometown who just so happens to have a house for sale. So she proceeds to tell me where the house is located in relation to where my kids are already signed up for school. We find out that with traffic, this house is 15 minutes from where we have our kids already signed up for school. And we're like, okay, God, what are you doing here? You're doing something. You're up to something. Seems like God's going before us. So, wanting to be excited but not get too carried away, we wanted to make sure that the house had 4 walls and at least had running water and electricity and no outstanding bills on the house. In March, for spring break, we took the kids with us to go visit the church plant that we handed over. And I actually convinced my wife. The plan was for me to go to Guadalajara. It's a 4-hour trip one way, so 8 hours round trip. And I said, hey, honey, I want you to come with me because I just have this feeling if we really like this house, I don't want you to miss it. I feel like you might want to see this. If I have to decide that we should do this, I don't want you to be like, I don't know, I've not seen this house. So she relented. She went with me. We're driving down there and we're getting to the part of Mexico that only uses cash for tolls. So I'm going through tolls, we run out of cash and I'm getting angry because I thought we had more cash. And so I'm getting frustrated and my GPS on my phone isn't working. I can't get my phone to charge, so the battery's dying on it. And we're just having to pivot. I'm like, God, this is either you're trying to tell me this isn't going to go the way that we were wanting it to go and I need to turn around and head home, or this is going to go really well. And so as I'm getting frustrated, and we all as men have been in those moments with our wives that we're not exactly nice. And so I sheepishly sneak in this prayer and I said, Lord, forgive me for being such a brute to my wife, to where she says, amen. And I said, but God, I really feel like this is something that you're behind, that you're in. I said, if this is what you're doing, help us to continue and have your guidance in this. So we're driving down the road, and not 5 minutes after I did this prayer, the next toll takes credit card, no problem. And I said, okay, God, this is so good. You're faithful. You're providing for us. And then I hear him say, she's going to offer you the house for 3 million pesos. Okay, that's a weird number. I was already ready to go with 4 to 5 million pesos, which is quite a bit more than what God had said. And we didn't know. We had no idea how much the house was going to be. So we go see this house. God gets us there. And this house is amazing. It's just completely incredible. So we're there, we're walking around, seeing the house. And my wife and I are completely surprised. We're like, this house is way more house than we anticipated. And she's like, oh, by the way, this is 5 bedrooms and 2 baths. And I went, what? Because the sister had said it was 4 bedrooms, 2 baths. And so my wife and I start to get really nervous. We're like, there's no way this is going to be what we even agreed upon going into it to negotiate, let alone God's price at 3 million pesos, right? And so she said, did my sister tell you how much the house is going for? And we're like, no. She just looks at us like we're a bunch of idiots. You just drove 4 hours one way and you don't even know how much the house is going for. And we're like, we're just trusting Jesus. That's how we operate. And she said, well, we had it on the market for 3.5 million pesos and talking with a realtor. And all I heard was more and more money. Like they're going to make some changes. They want to get more money out of it. And then she stops and I come back to listening. And she said, me and my siblings, we've agreed we want to sell you the house for 3 million pesos. And she said, and as I say 3 million pesos, I get goosebumps and I don't know why. So I just jumped to it and I said, I know exactly why you have goosebumps. And she said, why? I said, well, on the way here, God told me that you're going to sell us the house for 3 million pesos. And she was like, he did? And we were talking more and more about it. And she knew that we were Christians, and she knows that our whole purpose of moving to Guadalajara is that we want to start a church there. And so she was just really excited to see that God was moving in this, what to her was a new and exciting way. And she's like, I want to be part of that. I want you to buy this house because I see that God has his hand on you and your family's life. And we want you to do this. And she actually was negotiating on our behalf with her other siblings. Some of them were kind of hesitant to want to sell to us because we're American. Some of them were kind of hesitant just because they didn't know if they could trust us. The 2 sisters that we met were actually fighting for us with their siblings, saying, no, these are good people. We want them to buy this house. We would be blessed to have them buy our house. So we actually left that day really encouraged, really excited, and also questioning, God, we don't have $175,000 roughly as that exchange rate would be. We don't know where that's going to come from. Just said, okay, God, we don't believe that you're going to do something like this and not have the rest of the story for us. We know that you're our provider. And it's no coincidence that all these pieces have fallen together like they have so beautifully as you've placed them together. So we just said, all right, God, you bring the people that we need to share this story with. And we have, and we've shared the story and people are getting really excited about it. And so one of the things that we're really excited about is our home church is doing a partnership with us in this and said, we're going to match the funds with you to help to reduce a loan. We don't even want you to have a loan. We want to work with you. So at this current moment, we're working towards a matching program of matching up to $50,000. So as we raise $50,000, the church will bless us with another $50,000, which puts us at $100,000. Beyond that, we just really see God moving in crazy ways. Every person we've told this story to, they just feel something inside them saying, we want to give to that. And so as we go back to Guadalajara, this will be us starting what I believe will be 4 church plants. So Guadalajara is actually 4 boroughs, as I like to explain it, that have grown together. There's Guadalajara, Sopopan, Tonalá, and Tlaquepaque. And these 4 communities have grown together, and that is what makes up the larger area of Guadalajara. And we really feel God calling us to plant a church in each of those communities that will reach and cover all of Guadalajara. And the unique part of this story is that without us really doing more than just praying and saying, God, lead us as you will, the sister that showed us the house, she lives in Tlaquepaque and said, I want you in my house. I want you to start a group in my home. And we're just so excited to see God's faithfulness. From me as an infant, hearing God's call on my life to ministry, and my wife at the age of 14, her call to missions, and me saying yes to missions, to saying yes to some crazy story, some crazy journey, and seeing God saying, I will be faithful to you. I will provide for you. That's been our story, and that's how we're here today.
Stephen and his wife found a baller house right in the perfect location and way bigger than they thought and way cheaper. Speaking of way cheaper, when I went into Edley's to get my banana pudding, I asked, can I have some banana pudding, please? The young woman at the register said, sure. I got out my wallet and prepared to pay, and she said, no charge. We're trying to get rid of the rest. It's almost closing time. She brought me a small bowl of it, and I said, let me pay for at least one of them because I need one for both me and my wife. Again, the young woman got me another bowl, brought it to me, smiled, and said, no charge. Have a great night. I know a house is way more important than banana pudding, but even as I say that, I think I'm wrong, and I want to backtrack. I'm not sure a house is way more important than banana pudding. I love to get my kids things that they enjoy and things they need. They don't have to earn it. They don't have to even ask for it sometimes. I just like to do it. In Matthew 7:11, Jesus says, if you then who are evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? In all of these stories, God provided good things, whether it was a $20 bill, money to break even, dinner, gas money, a house, or even just banana pudding. God provided each gift at the perfect time. And that makes me say, wow, God. And when I say wow, God, I mean the one true living God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's the one who makes my heart say,
wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
My wow God story.
I wanted to share a wow God moment.
That's my wow God story. And praise God.
And I'm so thankful to God for this wow God moment.
So, thank you, God.